Hello students, this is Mrs. Miller, and the purpose of this video is to share my thinking as I read Save It for the Finish. This was the practice I-step test that we did, and we didn't do too well on it, so I'm going to read the story with you and share my thinking, and then in another video I will go over the answers. We'll do the answers together, okay? The first thing I like to do is I read the title, Save It for the Finish, and I'm going to look at the text features. Here I see a picture, and this is Marshall W. Major Taylor, so I know he must be somebody who is going to race. And I'm going to read a little information here. More than 100 years ago, when bicycle races drew huge crowds, the biggest draw of all was Marshall W. Major Taylor, who was born in rural Indiana in 1878. Oh, that's interesting. That's where we live. I'm just going to put a smiley face. I think that's kind of neat that he was born where we live. Okay? All right. Here we go. Oh, let me see if there are any other text features that I want to look at. And there are not. So let's begin. Charlie Ames trooped along behind his cousin, Douglas Brown, and wished he was back in Boston, watching his beloved baseball team, the Boston Beaneaters, beat the Cleveland Spiders. Whoa, now I'm a little bit confused because this picture, and this is about Marshall Major Taylor, but right now I have two other characters. So in order to keep everybody straight, I'm just going to do a little character sketch right here. And I'm going to put Charlie. And Charlie loves baseball. I'm just going to put loves baseball. This way I know who's who. And Douglas is his cousin. And that's what I have about my character so far. Instead, his cousin, okay, so Charlie's cousin, because this is told, it's a third person point of view, but it's from Charlie's perspective. And when it says his, it's referring to Charlie. So instead, his cousin, who was undoubtedly the bossiest person in the world, was dragging him to a ridiculous bicycle race. That tells me the word ridiculous there lets me know that Charlie really isn't all that interested in the bicycle race. So I'm just going to put a little note here that says not interested. He thinks it is ridiculous. Also, he already told us that he would rather be watching baseball than going to this bicycle race. And I'm going to add to my character information here, Douglas is not only a cousin, he is a bossy cousin. So I'm going to add the word bossy. It was the summer of 1892, and Charlie was spending 2 weeks in Indianapolis with his Aunt Charlotte and Uncle George. So I'm just going to jot their names down. I'm going to put Aunt C, and I'm going to put Uncle G. So Charlie went and is staying with them. Okay, so Douglas must be their son. Douglas must be their son. He loved his aunt and uncle, but he hadn't counted on being constantly under the thumb of Douglas, the dictator, who was 2 years older than Charlie and constantly telling him how to do things or giving him unsolicited advice. Okay, so Douglas is the child of Aunt C and Uncle G. I'm going to add that. Child. So Douglas is the child of Aunt C and Uncle G, and Charlie is spending 2 weeks with them this summer. Okay, got it. I noticed that this was an interesting metaphor. He calls him Douglas the dictator. I'm going to underline that interesting metaphor, because a dictator is somebody who tells people exactly what they have to do. So now I know just how bossy Douglas is. Speed it up, Charlie, Douglas yelled as he crossed Pennsylvania Avenue, darting in front of a horse and a wagon and just getting out of the way of a putt-putting motor car. We don't want to miss the start. Oh, so I see Douglas is in a hurry, and he seems really excited about going to this bicycle race. So I'm going to put D is excited. We already know that C, or Charlie, is not interested, but these details show me that Douglas is excited about going to see the bicycle race. "I'd just as soon not be trampled by a team of horses," Charlie yelled back, but Douglas didn't pay no attention. "See that bicycle shop?" Douglas said after they had run a few blocks. "Major Taylor does trick cycling in front and always draws a big crowd, even rides upside down." Oh, so here was the picture of Major Taylor. So perhaps he's the person that they're going to go see. They went past the bicycle shop, and Douglas tells Charlie about Major Taylor, who is the bike rider. So I'm just going to put a little note right here that tells me that Major Taylor is the bike rider. Okay. Let's continue on. Eventually, they reached the field where the race was to be held and sat with the other spectators on the grass near the finish line. Douglas explained, as if Charlie were a 5-year-old, that the racers would complete 6 laps around the course and that the finish line was the best place for them to watch. Okay, Charlie, he explains it as if Charlie were a 5-year-old, so that tells me he's talking to him in a very patronizing way, and that's probably really annoying Charlie. When the cyclists began to move into position at the starting line, Douglas pointed to the rider with the number 13 armband. "There he is. That's Major." Okay, now I understand. So Douglas and Charlie are going to a bicycle race to watch Major. Major is the cyclist that Douglas seems to be really impressed with. All right, I just had to clarify my thinking. Charlie wasn't impressed. He's just a kid. Well, he's my age, nearly 14, but he has incredible talent, a genius. This is his second race, and I can't wait to see how he does because he won the first one flat out. Okay, because of the quotations, I know that Charlie says he's just a kid, but since we go to a new paragraph and it's indented and there's quotation marks, I know this is a new speaker. So I know that Douglas is the one who says that. So just to clarify my thinking, I'm going to put that Douglas says that. So I can just envision right now, Charlie and Douglas are sitting in the stands and they're about to watch this race. And Douglas thinks that Major, who is the bike racer, is going to win. Charlie doesn't think so. Charlie's like, he's just a kid. Charlie, there's nothing special about him to Charlie. At this point, Charlie was barely listening. That's how annoying his cousin was. Charlie simply shook his head in disbelief, thinking that the owners of the Boston Bean Eaters weren't foolish enough to permit 14-year-olds to play second base. Okay, the Boston Bean Eaters, remember that was the name of the baseball team that Charlie enjoyed watching, and he knew that they would never let a 14-year-old play second base, which is one of the positions in baseball, and so he can't even figure out why there's a 14-year-old kid who is a racer. At the sound of the starting pistol, the crowd roared. But after the first lap of the race, Major was near the back of the pack. Okay, the crowd roared. This tells me that the crowd is excited. They're really excited to see the race going on. But Major, the one who's supposed to win, he's at the very back. "I'm sure he'll catch up," Douglas announced, but he seemed worried, his confidence waning. Okay, so at first he was very confident up here. I'm just going to put a note that he was confident that Douglas was going to win, and now, he was confident that Major was going to win. I apologize. He was confident that Major was going to win, so I put confident, and now he is worried. So he's changed from here to here. When Major was still behind on the third and fourth laps, Douglas's face fell in obvious disappointment. Okay, so he's gone from confident to excited, and he's now disappointed. Why is Douglas disappointed? Well, Douglas is disappointed because he thought that Major was going to win the race, and Major is in last place. He should be winning. How could I be wrong? For a fleeting moment, Charlie actually felt sorry for his cousin. Okay, now, his cousin is who? Charlie's cousin is Douglas, the one who's sitting in the stands right next to him. Okay, remember, Charlie and Douglas are sitting in the stands together, and they're watching this race. Then, on the fifth lap, Major did something very strange. He slowed up and fell even further behind. Burying his head in his hands, Douglas groaned. This is crazy. Maybe he's sick. Why does Douglas groan? Well, Douglas groans because the person he thinks is supposed to be winning the race, who is Major, has fallen way back into last place. And Douglas can't figure out why Major is in last place. He thinks that maybe Major is sick. Major's not really sick. That's just what Douglas thinks because he's losing. But Major's odd behavior made Charlie sit up and take notice. Okay, all of a sudden, Charlie is starting to get interested. Remember, up until this point, Charlie, who's sitting here in the stands, was wanting to go watch his baseball game, and he did not want to be at the game. But now, Major's odd behavior makes him sit up and take notice. He saw that as soon as the other cyclist relaxed, Major was able to edge around them and get on the outside of the group. You know, Douglas, Charlie said, maybe he's not ill or crazy. Maybe he's maneuvering himself into the best position. Interesting. So remember, Charlie and Douglas are sitting in the stands watching the bicycle race, and they see Major, and Major's falling further and further behind the others, and Charlie, who's sitting over here, is explaining the strategy to his cousin. So I'm just going to put the word strategy right here. Charlie's words actually had an effect on Douglas, who perked up. Okay, so Douglas is changing again. He was confident, and then he was worried, and then he was disappointed, and now he's perking back up. And at that instant, Major pulled away from the rest of the group in an amazing sprint. Leaping to their feet, the spectators cheered with Charlie and Douglas probably screaming the loudest. Charlie and Douglas are both screaming really loud. This tells me that they're really excited. Okay. Major accommodated the crowd by completing a full lap in what seemed to be a blink of time. Whoa, that's a really neat idiom. He completed the lap in a blink of time. That simply means that he completed the lap very quickly. The nearest cyclist was 20 yards behind him when he shot across the finish line. Okay, so Major really did win the race. So Major won the race. Save it for the finish. That's what the great cyclists do, said a man next to them who was slapping hands with the people around him. Okay, so there's all these people in the crowd, and we have Douglas, and we have Charlie, and there's the other people in the crowd, and this man sitting right here, who they don't know, it's just somebody who's in the crowd, says, save it for the finish. That's what the great cyclists do. That's what makes a winner, Douglas yelled. After the pandemonium died down, Douglas slapped Charlie on the back. You know, little cuz, I underestimated you. You understand strategy. Interesting. I think it's interesting that Douglas had been treating Charlie kind of poorly before. Like, he was talking to him like he was a little kid. He was yelling at him to hurry. He didn't seem to have a whole lot of respect for him. But now he's actually paying Charlie a compliment because Charlie understood the strategy that Major was using. Charlie was momentarily stunned. Had he just received a compliment from Douglas? Then Charlie smiled. I think it's your man Major who has the great sense of strategy. He may be just a kid, but he sure seems to know what he's doing. And I have to admit that bike racing is a pretty exciting sport. Not as exciting as baseball, but... Douglas seemed not to have heard and was watching Major Taylor as he received the first place medal. I knew all along he'd win, Douglas said. And I can see now that once again Douglas is confident. Okay. Now, Charlie still likes baseball better, but he's saying this bike racing stuff, it really is okay. Okay, my friends, I hope that this helps you to understand the story. Let's just go through our characters again. Charlie is the one who loves baseball. Douglas is his cousin, his bossy cousin, and Douglas is also the child of Aunt C and Uncle G. And then I'm going to put Major Taylor. And Major Taylor is the bike racer. Okay. Now that we have all of our characters straight, you should have been able to understand the story a little bit better.